Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to the 12th episode of Rowen Reports with Dr. Robert J. Rowen. Today, we welcome the brilliant Pastor Sean O'Leary to the show, and I am very excited to bring this intriguing conversation to you, our audience. Let us know what you think in the comments of this video, and if you'd like to support this podcast directly, Dr. Rowen is now on Patreon. You can find him there and visit our generous sponsors by following the links in the description below. Now, I'd like to start with some words by Pastor Sean himself. The real question is not how much consciousness, if any, survives death, but rather, how much consciousness survives birth. Before we jump in, we would like to give a special thank you to our sponsor, PROMOLIFE, bringing you closer to the benefits of ozone therapy. Proudly rooted in the USA, PROMOLIFE is at the forefront of assembling ozone therapy generators designed for both personal and professional use, right here on American soil. Meticulously handcrafted and precision calibrated, each ozone generator speaks quality and reliability. PROMOLIFE has simplified the ozone therapy process by offering a complete line of high-quality accessories that allow you to use ozone in ways you never thought possible. Don't miss out and explore the entire collection of cutting-edge offerings at www.promolife.com/ozone. Make sure you use the coupon code in the description of this podcast for an exclusive discount towards your journey to enhanced well-being. I am also excited that our friends at shopc60.com are helping to sponsor this video. If you haven't heard of C60 before, also known as Carbon 60, it is a powerful antioxidant that helps to optimize mitochondrial function, fight inflammation, and neutralize toxic free radicals. I'm a big fan of using C60 in conjunction with keto and intermittent fasting lifestyle to help support the immune system, help your body detox, and increase energy and mental clarity. If you are over the age of 40 and you'd like to kick fatigue and brain fog to the curb this year, visit shopc60.com and use the coupon code in the description for 10% off your first order. This episode is also brought to you by Simply O3. Did you know ozone therapy has been a transformative medical approach for over 100 years? Used for enhancing immune function, boosting energy, and improving blood flow, it's a powerhouse for maintaining health. Today, over 2,500 medical studies back its benefits, and it's especially effective before workouts, reducing fatigue. Curious to try? Visit simplyo3.com and explore the world of ozone therapy. Use the code in the description of this podcast for 10% off everything they offer, like the Simply O3 3.0 Complete Kit. Begin your journey to better health today.
Thank you. Pastor Sean is a personal friend of ours meaning Terry and me. We are good friends with him and his partner, Dr. Brownstein. And at our last get-together over a meal, he told me a little bit of his saga as a pastor with COVID and the government. And I thought it interesting enough to bring it into the podcast because it's connected to medical politics, health, among other things. I think you'll find it fascinating, as did I. And the only thing I can ask Sean, since he is Irish, is to try to keep his accent as small as possible so we can understand him. Sean, please go ahead and tell us your story.
Okay, so let me give you some kind of background as far as some kind of a sense of my journey, because COVID is just the latest episode. I'm Irish. I trained in mathematical physics and pure mathematics in college. Spent 8 years in a seminary. Was ordained as a Catholic priest. Spent 14 years working in East Africa. Learned 4 African languages. Wrote a book in Swahili. And then got thrown out by the government in 1986 because of my penchant for giving the finger to the man. You know, I have a real sense of social justice. And so I was outraged at the kind of what I was seeing among politicians in Kenya. There was a very bad famine there in 1984, 85, 86, and I was bringing food in and distributing it to 19 villages in my area, only to find out that a local politician who was an assistant minister in the government was taking the food at gunpoint from his own people and selling it. So he and I clashed furiously at public meetings. And finally, the last tribe of people I worked with was the tribe from which the president came, a man called Daniel Toroitich Arab Moi. So I had a face-to-face encounter with him. I wanted to bring to his attention what was happening. So I got pulled in by the special branch CID, chief of police, and I was given 48 hours to leave. So I got thrown out of Kenya. I spent a year in London studying Jungian psychology. Then I came to the States, and I was working in the Catholic Diocese of San Jose. I worked there for about 8 years while I was doing a PhD in clinical psychology. And then I got thrown out of the diocese because of my theology. And then in 2010, I got a 2-page letter in Latin from the Vatican telling me that I was being dismissed as a Catholic priest for 2 reasons: for my disobedience and what they termed my loss of faith, because I was a big believer in reincarnation and I was a big advocate for women as priests. So I co-founded a group called, I'm not going to tell you the name because I don't want to get them in trouble. I co-founded a group in 1997, and I've been the spiritual director of this group since. And it was based in Silicon Valley. So I worked down in that area for many, many years. It's 1997 we founded it. And then I began to run into trouble with these around woke issues. And it came to a head with the COVID issue in 2020. So I was taking a really strong stance. I refused to wear a mask. I would not, celebrate the Eucharist with a mask on me. I refused to do it. And Santa Clara County was insisting, that everybody wear masks in church. I refused to do that. And so I gave a series of homilies on a weekly basis during Mass where I was taking issue. And I said several times that, I was very critical of allopathic medicine particularly, and its response to the COVID sham. And I began to see the same kind of a scenario again and again and again. It's as old as the oligarchy itself, where you create or harvest an existing crisis, often with a false flag operation. Then you use the mass media to hype the crisis and then to suggest solutions. And then the gullible populace is hollering, for the solutions to be implemented. And then finally, the oligarchy reluctantly agrees to the solutions that they've pre-planned. And the price always is the temporary loss of civil rights, which of course are never brought back. And I began to think about, and I said this publicly to them, if I were a despot and I wanted to control this species, I couldn't come up with a better plan than what happened in 2020 going forward. The first thing is you shut down religion. You cover individual identity so people can't even recognize each other. You encourage people to snitch on their neighbors. You transfer wealth from the middle class and the lower class into the oligarchy. You see an escalation of suicide, anxiety, depression, domestic violence, spousal abuse, drug addiction, which I see in my practice. And then you use the mass media to kind of create a panic. And then you shut down all the alternative perspectives using the mass media. So you get both censorship and propaganda. These are the 2 wings where you shut down any real data and you promote a totally different storyline. Now, so for me then, this is what I'm talking about. And I couldn't think of a more devious and successful way of controlling the population. So I've been meditating for 60 years and I've had lots of very powerful visionary experiences, but I had a very powerful one in December of 2012. I live in the middle of the forest. You've seen where I live, Robert, and there's a Pina Creek runs through it, and I spend most of my time down there with my dog, Kayla. And I had a lot of kind of mystical experiences and encounters with what I would consider astral beings, because I believe we live at 7 different levels. The gross level, the etheric level, the astral level, the mental level, the psychic level, the soul level, and then ultimate source sense. So I've had many encounters with beings at astral levels. So I go down there one day in December 2012, and there's a guy sitting on the river with his feet dangling into it. And he looks like a farmer from Oklahoma with kind of dungarees, and he's chewing on a blade of grass. So I sit beside him, I put my feet in the river, and I pluck a piece of grass, put it into my mouth, and I'm chewing. And I think in my mind, I wonder, is he going to tell me a story? And he turned to me and he said, I will. And the story he told me was, he said, I'm a being from a totally different solar system. And my job is to seed life in various parts of the Milky Way galaxy. And I've done this hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times. And he said, once we kind of seed life, we water it, we weed it, we genetically modify it. And he said, I can predict precisely how every kind of planet is going to evolve up to the point where we confer free will on them. At that stage, all bets are off.
Yeah.
And he said, your planet is at that stage, and it's at a trifurcation point. He said there's going to be three versions going forward. The first version he called Homo sociopathicus, which is an oligarchy who will attempt to control everything else, and we're all just resources for them. The second one he called Homo artificialis, and he said this will be a kind of cyborgs who are hackable and programmable. And the third group he called Homo spiritualis, and these are people who are fully awake to their own divinity and the divinity of all other beings with whom they inhabit the planet. And that's going forward. And your job as a priest is to try to wake up the lions, to make sure that they don't become just Homo artificialis and that the sociopaths don't get away with it. And so that's been kind of my focus for the last 12 years now. And I've spoken about this many, many, many times to my own community. So the COVID brought it to a kind of a head at that stage. Because now I'm looking exactly what's happening. There's total domination, this fear-based, conformity, the kind of notion of artificial intelligence and transhumanism, where basically there'll just be a masterclass and a kind of a cyborg race who will serve their needs. And in the meantime, a radical diminution of the world population through any means possible, so that there's a small group who can be controlled by a tiny little elite. So I've been inveighing mightily against this, for the last 12 years in particular. It came to a head then. I created a series of kind of seminars to try to educate people on what I believed was happening with COVID and the response to COVID, and I got tremendous blowback from my community in Silicon Valley. And the clinger came when I've done a lot of interviews over the last 3 or 4 years. I got an invitation from Sherry Tenpenny to be interviewed by her. And every time I got an invitation, I would circulate it to my group saying, I'm going to be interviewed. If you're interested, here's the link. And I got this blowback. People tell me, how dare you talk to Sherry Tenpenny, this kind of purveyor of pseudoscience. And so I didn't agree. I fought back with them. So there were a whole series of community meetings where they're taking issue with the stances I'm taking, that I'm too political. And I said, I can't be a spiritual director unless I'm political. Now, I've never been a member of a political party, not when I lived in Ireland, not when I lived in Kenya, and not since I've come to the States. So I'm an American citizen as well as being an Irish citizen, and I voted, but I always vote on issues, not along party politics line. I've never kind of joined any of the parties. So I said, I cannot be a spiritual director if I don't, have something to say about political issues. I won't get involved in party politics. I won't advocate for a particular party, but I will certainly talk about particular political issues. And I'm worse than useless to you if I don't give you some kind of guidance where the rubber meets the road, where you're having to live your life on a daily basis. And so one of the things I kept saying to them was, if I never upset anybody, I'm a useless spiritual director, just dealing in kind of bland platitudes. Mm-hmm. If I'm constantly upsetting a whole bunch of people, then either I'm in the wrong group or you're in the wrong group. But my job as spiritual director is to occasionally upset everybody in the community, because I believe that our basic mission as individual human beings is to create what I call a personal cosmology. And all the great teachers tell us that. Socrates would say, the unexamined life is not worth living. Gautama Siddhartha would say, I am awake. Jesus Christ would say, if the householder knew at what stage the thief was going to break in and steal, he wouldn't go to sleep. So it's all about being awake. And being awake means creating your own personal cosmology. And the cosmology should do 4 things for you. The first thing is, it should make your heart sing. The second thing is, it should stretch you out of your comfort zone. Thirdly, it should be able to explain every single experience you have. And fourthly, it needs to be constantly updated. And so I'm saying to people, I'm giving you my opinion on all of these issues, but you have to come to your own opinion. But it has to be an informed conscience. The Catholic Church says that the ultimate arbiter of a moral decision is not the Pope, it's not the Church, it is an informed conscience. But it has to be an informed conscience. You can't just have an opinion, and then believe that that's your conscience speaking if you're not doing the groundwork and the research. So I keep saying to them, you have to create your own personal cosmology. And the purpose of a community is twofold. The first purpose of a community is to support you in your search for truth. And the next mission of a community is to challenge your belief systems. Otherwise, all you have is a cult. And so this is the message I've been preaching for many, many years. So it came to a head when every year we organized 3 retreats, one for the men, one for the women, and one for a mixed group. And it came to my attention that the women were organizing the retreat for the women, and that they had disbarred a particular woman, an elderly lady who refused to get the shot and refused to wear a mask. And they disbarred her from attending the women's retreat as they were planning it. And I was asked in the Sunday service, I was asked right in front of the community, what's your opinion of this? I said, that's apartheid. And then all hell broke loose. I got left, right, and center lambasted, by the group by claiming this was apartheid. But that's exactly what it was. They were treating this woman as a leper. And I said, this is what I'm noticing here. So they asked me to retract the statement. I said, there's no bloody way I'm going to retract that statement. So the retreat actually never happened. It fell asunder and it didn't happen. But at that stage now, I'm seeing fairly significant exodus from the community. And then it got compounded most recently when I took a stance on what happened in Israel in October 7th. And I spoke about that. And I lost a group of people. And then on the 14th of July, after the assassination attempt on Donald Trump, I dedicated the Mass, I said, in gratitude for the miraculous protection of the president yesterday, and then a whole bunch more left. And so it's like, at this stage, okay, we're reduced in numbers, but it's like I found my tribe. If I'm not allowed to speak my truth, and if I can't pray for the welfare of a man who had been president of the country, I wasn't advocating for him. I was saying, I'm deeply grateful that this was actually, I would consider, a miraculous intervention that he was saying. And I'm looking at the barbarity of Hamas on October 7th. I felt duty bound to kind of address that issue. And so I've been losing people so it's been a kind of a combination of the COVID response, the October 7th, and offering a mass for a president who escaped assassination. So very briefly, that's kind of the backstory.
Wow. We've been friends a long time, and right. I didn't have all of that collected like you just did. First, thank you for speaking English instead of Irish. I could actually understand it. And I think everybody else will be able to understand it too. And I've got to tell you, Sean, I really identify with you. Now, this is your podcast, but I just, while we were having difficulty, I was writing up my next Substack report on the fact that fluoride has just been labeled as destroying the IQ of children.
Yes.
Now, I've been labeled fringe, a leper, a wacko, a pinko communist. I have been labeled all kinds of stuff for 30 years, longer than that, for coming out against fluoride in the 80s and 90s. We had public city council meetings in Anchorage, where I lived, on this, and they said lies to the city council to get the city council to legalize the crime they were committing in fluoridating the water, which they had never passed a resolution to do so. And now, 30 years later, oh my God, I've been proven correct. And when I say it's not me. It's the hundreds of other people who spoke out against this crime that was being handed down to us by the experts. And I'm listening to you say the same thing. I mean, people got up and walked out of that meeting when we spoke. And people got up and walked out on you, and you can't even, we have degenerated as a society to where we can't even have a difference of political opinion. in one religion in the world, in the extreme version of that religion, they kill you if you have a different opinion.
Yes. Yes.
I said the extreme wing
Yes.
of that religion.
Yes. Yes.
What is going on? Can you give some clarity as a pastor?
Yeah. Let me say two things to it, Robert. And first one is to thank you sincerely for the courage you've demonstrated. You know, I'm aware of some of your history. I've heard it from Ireland, and in our times we've been together for meals, you and I and Terry. But it's good to hear the kind of the details of it. But I have two responses to it. The first thing is that when I look at the notion of prophecy, most people think that a prophet is somebody who prognosticates about the future. I don't believe that to be the case. I think the prophet is the one who prevents the future from happening. Yeah?
I'm in total agreement with that.
Absolutely. And so 30 years after you said that, it's not so much that you prognosticated and said, this is what's happening, but that somehow you became a voice for people to kind of prevent it from getting worse. And I think that that's the real function of the prophet. It is not to kind of to foretell the future, it's to forestall the future. And when you look at your own tradition, the great Hebrew prophets, their most important thing was to prevent the future, not to foretell it. There's one exception to it. There's the great story, if you know, of Jonah, the prophet Jonah. And he's been asked by God to go and preach to the people of Nineveh. And Nineveh was the capital of the Assyrian Empire that had conquered Israel in 722 BCE and deported the 10 northern tribes, and they're never heard of again. There's only two tribes left, Benjamin and Judah. And now Jonah's been asked by God to go into Nineveh and say 40 more days and this great city is going to be destroyed. And Jonah doesn't want to do it. He tries to escape. He's trying to get as far away from God as possible. He gets on a ship, maybe in Akko, in Israel, and he wants to sail to Spain, right across the Mediterranean. And the ship gets into difficulties, and he's thrown overboard, swallowed by a whale, and brought back. And God says, now are you going to go to Nineveh? And very reluctantly he goes, and he walks into the city. A day's journey, says, 40 more days, and Nineveh, the great city, is going to be destroyed. And people start listening, and they go to the king, and they say, there's this Hebrew prophet, and he's saying 40 more days, and Nineveh, the great city, is going to be destroyed. And the king says, let's put on sackcloth and ashes. Let's repent of our ways. So Jonah goes out and he sits on a hilltop watching for the destruction to happen. And he's sitting under a kind of a gourd tree, which has big, big, wide leaves. And the tree withers, and he's in the baking sun. He says to God, this is my thanks, for being your prophet. You killed the gourd plant. And God says to him, you didn't plant this, and you didn't water it, you didn't care for it, and you're upset that I'm going to kill a gourd plant, and you want me to kill 120,000 people in that city who don't know their left hand from their right hand, not to mention all the cattle. So the people repented. So you would think that Jonah would be happy, that he had an effect, but he wasn't. He was more interested in being right, than being a force.
Wow, yes.
So that was my guide. When I looked at the function of any prophet, is to prevent the future, because there are kind of three versions of the future. There's the kind of inevitable outcome, that if we live in a deterministic world, I don't believe we do. But there's a probable outcome if we don't change what we're doing, and there's a possible outcome if we do change what we're doing. And I see people like you, that your prophetic ministry is not to prove yourself right, but to prove yourself to be a healer, what would I call it? To prevent the real bad stuff from happening by giving us early warning systems. So for me, people like yourself, poets, these are the early warning system of our planet. And we're in a period where we need that. Now, the good side for me is that I believe we're going through a kind of a birthing process. I don't know if you've ever come across the work of Stan Grof. Have you encountered him? Stan Grof was this great Hungarian psychiatrist who worked in the States for many years. And he created what he called the basic perinatal matrices, that there are 4 stages to the birthing process. And he claimed that each stage correlates subsequently with adult neurotic behavior, 20, 30 years down the line. And the 4 stages, he said, were the in utero experience, the womb experience. Is it a good womb or a bad womb? Am I being nurtured in here? Is my mother being violently treated? Am I declining nutrition, or is it a happy place for me? That's matrix number 1. Number 2 is the contractions begin, but the cervix is still closed. So the walls are closing and it's freaking out. there's no escape. But the container is getting tinier and tinier and tinier. That's stage 2. Stage 3 is the cervix is now open and it's spelunking through this really, really cave, wondering, is it going to make it out? And the 4th one is, it's out, the umbilical cord is cut, there's all these noises, all these lights and whatever. And he claimed that you can correlate that very significantly, psychologically, with neurotic behavior in the adults. At what stage was it most difficult for them? I have a theory that I just came up with some weeks ago, that planet Earth itself, and particularly the United States of America, is experiencing the 4 basic perinatal matrices. So the question I ask my community, if the USA is a womb, is it a good womb or a bad womb right now? Is it nurturing us or it's not? We the people. Secondly, at some stage, the contractions are going to begin. How are you going to handle the contractions? Are you going to cooperate with them or resist them? Because if you resist them, you're making it a much longer labor, a much more difficult labor. So what does it look like for we, the people, to kind of cooperate with the contractions that are leading to the birth of a new version of America in the world? Number 3, the cervix is now open and we're spelunking through it. Are the midwives and the doulas and the doctors of our times, are they facilitating the birth? Are they trying to create some kind of a late-term abortion of the possibilities? And the 4th one then is we're out. But it's going to be a hell of a struggle. And the question then becomes, are we up for the struggle? Have we got the courage to engage with the battle? Because it is a battle, but there can be no baby born unless we're prepared to work with the contractions, and do whatever we need to do. And so for me, these are the kinds of messages I want to give to the people constantly, so that they don't lose heart, so they realize, we're birthing something beautiful. We're birthing Homo spiritualis. But in the meantime, Homo sociopathicus is going to fight like hell to late-term abortion.
Sean, you've known me for a long time.
Right.
And yes, I come from one particular religious background, but I consider myself spiritual now, fairly secular in religious stuff, but spiritual. And COVID did something to me.
Good.
Spiritually.
Yes.
And I want you to comment on this, because I was never prepared to say openly or publicly that I believe in Satan or something of the sort. But to me, what happened with COVID was like evil, a spiritual force, literally manifesting, taking its mask off and saying, I'm here.
Yes.
Now, what are you going to do about it? That's what I felt in dealing with COVID. And it sort of convinced me that there is, it's the only logical way I can explain it, that there is an evil spiritual force running amok on this planet. What do you have to say about that? Am I nuts?
No, you're not nuts. I'm 100% agreeing with you, Robert. I spent a lot of time thinking about this and talking about this. I have a practice before I go to sleep at night. I seed my dreams. I say, here's something that I want to kind of input on from my higher self or my soul self or from angelic realms or whatever. And so I'll pose a question. And then if I wake up in the middle of the night with the insight, I'll go and write it down in my office. Sometime last year, I posed this question. I said, can you tell me the difference between sin and evil? And I woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning with this burned in my mind.
Yeah,
it said, sin is the individual transgression of a culturally created precept. It's simply breaking a human law. Evil is a cosmic conspiracy using human intermediaries to separate souls from source. And I'm totally in agreement with you. There is a concerted effort, literally, to separate souls from source, to separate us from our inner divinity, to not recognize the divinity in nature, whether it's a bunny rabbit or an oak tree or another person. And so I see again and again and again this kind of this concerted attack to break down everything else. Now, I also believe that there's what Buddhism will call a tulpa. And a tulpa is an energy being created from our thoughts, our words, and our actions. That literally, if everything is energy, then every thought is generating energy. Every word is generating energy. Every act is generating energy. And to the extent that we're not working with our own shadow material, we have to project it. And I believe that, in interpersonal relationships, we project it and we have interpersonal difficulties. If we do it as a culture, we have race issues. If we do it as a globe, we're at enmity with the planet itself. So it feels to me like there's this giant tulpa constellated from the unrecognized shadow material of the human species, ably kind of abetted by these off-planetary energies. And that our job is to recognize that. There's a place in the Pacific called the North Pacific Garbage Patch. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, right. Where all the garbage that's dumped off the west coast of North America and the east coast of Asia, and all the stuff that's thrown out overboard ships. Because of the gyroscopic nature of the tides, there's this huge landmass bigger than the state of Texas. Now, I think there's a tulpa over the human family right now that's larger than that, and that has that kind of destructive energy. And that our job is to be light workers, to dissolve that and to bring light back into the equation. But I really believe that there's a disincarnate or an off-planetary energy that's orchestrating, using human intermediaries, this destruction of the civilization of Homo sapiens sapiens. But, it's waking a whole bunch of people up. So the light bringers are coming, and the light bringers are standing up and taking positions on all these issues. So, yeah, I'm totally on your camp there.
A friend of mine who is also a very spiritual man, coming from a Christian base, says to me that Satan has one job. That's to beguile you.
Yes.
He doesn't make you do anything.
Yes. Yeah.
He lures you in to committing your own personal sin or doing other things. Yeah. And I didn't want this to be a religious podcast. I wanted this to be a podcast related to health issues and related to issues dealing with our survival on an intellectual, on a personal, emotional level, which to me is being destroyed or attempted to be destroyed by what I now believe is openly apparent evil force that has infected what we typically call healthcare, or the press, government, and we're seeing people, families, literally families being ripped apart. And the best example I can give you of this, remember, the greatest time in our history of us being polarized and ripped apart was the Civil War. I know you're Irish, but you know this.
Yes, I do.
And it was the war between the states that literally divided families. Yeah. Look at what just happened with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and his family.
Yes, yes.
Now, I'm not endorsing anybody. I did not endorse anybody on Substack. I just brought forth their positions.
Yes.
Kennedy has taken a position that I happen to believe is righteous on.
Absolutely.
I don't agree with them across the board, but oh my God, on matters of health, the environment, pollution, among other things, how can you disagree with this man? And he saw no help on one side, so he went to another side. He's being ripped apart. And I will tell you, in my own family, the same thing is happening as I take similar stands. Comment, please, on what this force is doing to us.
It's doing precisely as you say, because the father of gaslighting is Satan. Now, I'm interested in looking at, what is the notion, there are kind of religious notions of Satan. There's a story in the book of Job, for instance, where Satan in Hebrew just literally means the adversary, somebody who takes an opposing viewpoint, almost in a kind of a legalistic defense lawyer, prosecuting lawyer scenario. And so that was the original intent. But when you look at it, there's a great Russian astrophysicist called Nikolai Kardashev, who about 40 years ago created what he called a typology of civilizations. So we believe that there are 3 totally different levels of civilization in the cosmos. Now, I think there are actually 5, but he said 3. So he said a type 1 civilization is a civilization that has managed to kind of use all of the resources of its own planetary home base, but to use it ecologically. A type 2 civilization is one that can do it for its entire solar system. So if we were there, we'd be harvesting Jupiter and Saturn and Pluto and people like that, but doing it, systematically, but doing it in a very beautiful way. A type 3 said we could do it for an entire galaxy. Now, I think there's a type 4 that could do it cosmically, and I even think there's a type 5 that could do it for parallel universes. So there's that kind of levels of typology. And he was asked, what type are we on planet Earth? He said a type 0. Yeah. So we're in a very kind of an interesting stage. So, there's the Hindu model of the 7 levels of body. I have a similar model of, I call it the bodies of Gaia. So that Gaia has 7 different levels of the self. There's the kind of the physiosphere, the 3rd rock from the sun, which is just a rock. That's the 1st level, the gross level of Gaia. Then the 2nd level of Gaia was the atmosphere. It created a womb around this rock. I know that's going to be studied by chemistry, perhaps. Then the 3rd phase of it was, now that it had a womb, it started creating flora and fauna there. So that was the 3rd stage. So the 4th stage is Tyler the Shada, called it the noosphere, the sheath of consciousness that's surrounding, the kind of the biosphere. And this sheath of consciousness is where we're at right now. So with the internet and communications and stuff like that, we're in transition between the biosphere and the noosphere. And that for me is the most dangerous, stage of all, because you're going through an asteroid belt. You can really destroy yourself with a nuclear holocaust or biochemical, fluoride in the water or kind of injections or whatever. So you could destroy the intelligence literally of the planet. The next level, I call it the animasphere. Anima as in soul, that the planet itself has a soul. The 6th level I call the pneumosphere, the spirit of God, and then finally source itself. In Hebrew, there's a great notion of netzotzim, that the ultimate source self-fractured into these sparks of the divine. They call them netzotzim. And I had this powerful vision last September in which I saw source, and source was lonely, because if there's only God, no experience is possible, because there's nothing to relate to and nothing with whom to relate. And so God self-fractured into these holographic fractals. And a hologram is that which contains the totality of itself in every one of its constituent elements. And a fractal is a pattern that repeats at an infinite number of scales. So God creates all these netzotzim, these souls. That was the 2nd stage. The 3rd stage I saw in my dream was there was the first conference where the souls got together with God and said, let's do something creative. What will we do? And the decision was, let's create a cosmos. And so the cosmos was co-created by God and these souls. And they become these fascinated witnesses of what they've just created. But then there was a 2nd conference that said, what would it be like if we could take on spacesuits and actually become avatars and experience it from inside, not just witness it from outside, but actually be participant, what cultural anthropology will call participant observer, that we could actually be part of it. And we did. And there are various levels of densification of the space.
And this is the spacesuit, is it not?
This is the spacesuit, precisely. This thing here. The skin encapsulated ego is the spacesuit. But it was an attempt to say, I wonder how far from source could I wander and still remember that I'm a divine being. And that was the test. And that's the test we're going through now. And at some stages of human history, and as some of the mystics of all the great systems realize, no matter how dense the spacesuit, I will never forget that I'm a divine being, as are you. Hinduism would say, Namaste. The divine in me recognizes and honors the divine in you. But most of us are asleep at the wheel. And we think we are the spacesuits. We identify with the ego. And then these extraterrestrial entities come in and they promote the vision. It's almost like, I think that these, because they're non-physical entities, that their food is kind of emotional energy. And so when I see, for instance, people making 2 dogs fight and kill each other, or 2 cocks fight and kill each other, it's absolutely barbaric. That people can get a high from watching animals savage each other. And that's exactly what these off-planetary entities are doing. They're getting their thrills and they're literally their energy from the emotional distress of Homo sapiens sapiens. So they're fomenting all the ways in which they can create that distress, whether it's division of families or genders or races, our nations, our wars of various kinds. So they're feeding on this energy. And as long as we keep feeding them, they're going to fatten and we're going to weaken. And so it's about the light workers waking up to the realization there's nobody on the planet, I believe right now, Robert, who didn't volunteer to be here and to be here now. Over 99% of us have fallen asleep at the wheel. There's amnesia. In Judaism, there's this great notion of Ayela, the angel of night, who before a baby is born, pinches the nostrils and makes an indentation on the upper lip, which is why you've got these marks here. And it is to create amnesia for who you really are. Because the journey is to discover and to remember who you are, and then remember why you came down. So I say to my own people, we make preconception contracts with each other. Our souls come down here in cohort groups, and we only know 4 things as we come. The first thing is, I know the track record of everybody I'm going to encounter during an incarnation, including my own. I know their strengths and their weaknesses. The second thing I know is, I know the exact circumstances into which I'm incarnating. I'm parachuting down into a specific family, a specific culture, a specific time in human history, and I know precisely what the situation is right now. I know what my mission is, what I'm coming down to do. And finally, I know what I call my secret, sacred name. It is the name that Grandmother God whispers to the soul as it's singing its way into incarnation. And that for me is what spirituality is about. I differentiate between religion and spirituality. Religion is merely the training wheels for spirituality. And true spirituality is to remember what your secret name is and to sing it, because that will waken you up to who you are, who others are, and what your mission is.
When I was put away, I received a lot of wonderful books, many spiritual books. You are singing the song of one book that I read word for word, cover to cover, Journey of the Soul.
Michael Newton. Yes, I read his 3 books, and in 2006, a good friend of mine, Matt McKay, helped me. I did a between lives regression session for 4 hours, and I would say it was probably the most significant spiritual experience of my entire life. In fact, I gave a retreat to my community just in March, a 3-day retreat where I went right through the transcripts of that session, talking about what happened at the end of the last incarnation, and before I arrived as Sean. Where was I? Whom did I meet? And what was the experience like? I love Michael Newton's work.
This was just unbelievable to me. It was believable. I've done hypnosis.
Yeah.
When I first learned it, I did regression therapy. Back to childhood, back to baby even. Yes. But I couldn't get further than that. And then I read this book, and it's talking about exactly what you just spoke about. Yeah. And to me, it's consistent with every religion there is. Yes. The Christians, quote, Christians, they don't want to hear this. But to me, Jesus said, unless you be born again, you can't enter the kingdom of heaven.
Exactly.
Well, what does that mean? If you take it for the English and it was translated into, you have to be born again, and as you sow, so shall you reap, which is karma.
Yes, exactly.
Put the 2 together. Right. We have to come back, and we will reap what we have sown.
Absolutely. So there's actually a great story, Bob. I read it yesterday for my own congregation. It's from John's Gospel in chapter 9, where Jesus is coming out of Jericho and he encounters a man who's been born blind and he's begging. And the disciples say to him, whose fault is it that he was born blind? Was it his own fault or was it his parents' fault? Now that's a meaningless question unless there was reincarnation. How could somebody be born blind for their own sin unless they believed in reincarnation? And esoteric Judaism believed in reincarnation. And so Christ went on and healed him subsequently. And what he's saying is, he wasn't born blind for his own sin or for the parents' sin, but that the works of God might be manifested, that we don't appreciate sight until we encounter those who are sightless. And so the fact that we encounter illnesses is a kind of an invitation to be grateful for health and to try to look at how we can create our own health. So I believe there are 6 factors in illness. The first one is genetic predisposition. either as a particular individual within a family, or a particular family within a tribe, or a particular culture. So there's a genetic predisposition. Secondly, there's environmental influences, both in utero, school system, neighborhood, whatever. The third one, I believe, is personal lifestyle, diet, exercise, sleep patterns, etc. The fourth one is personal belief systems. Am I kind of a hopeless character or a hopeful character? Am I a happy dude? I'm depressed or whatever. Am I atheistic? I don't believe there's any point to life, or I'm spiritual and mystical. So that'll be number 4. Number 5 for me is karma. That there are some lessons which are so great and so important that we kind of bite off several lifetimes in order to kind of work through them. What would it be like if I were born crippled? What would it be like if I were born a millionaire? So would I still be a kind of a spiritual person, a compassionate person if I were a billionaire? Would I be a compassionate person if I were born into a gang in LA? And so karma is the opportunity to try on different spacesuits and still try to remember who I am. And then the 6th one I call the Bodhisattva vow. The Bodhisattva in Buddhism is the notion that there are some souls who are so evolved that they have no personal karma to work off, but they come back to wake up the rest of us. And so I think there's a little bit of the Bodhisattva in every single one of us who is able to experience compassion for other people who are suffering. And that we agree sometimes to experience vicissitude in order to kind of allow other people to experience compassion for us. And so I put all these pieces together and I realize, when people like Christ say what you've just quoted them as saying, there's a deep, deep, deep meaning to that. You have to go way beyond the kind of the literal meaning, which is why he will constantly speak in parables. And the audience is always, they're upset with him. Why are you always talking in parables? He talked plainly to us. And he gave 2 different answers. He said, I speak in parables so that seeing you may see, but not understand. Hearing you may hear, but not comprehend. In other words, if you're trying to grok what I'm telling you at an intellectual level, you're not going to get it, dude. You must listen at your heart level and your soul level. And the second time he was asked, he said, I speak in parables so that I may reveal things which have been hidden since the foundation of the world. There are some truths which are so deep that only music or art or dance, or stories can kind of grok it. So, but most people, most Christians, will be fundamentally interpreted in a literal fashion, and then they've totally missed who he was and what he came to do.
Sean, when we were at our meal last, you had some incredible quotes. That's where I said to you, I want you on my podcast. I want people to hear this because the wisdom was beyond profound.
Thank you.
Bring some of that out, please.
Okay, so I created a few manifestos. So I have a kind of a log for myself where I get these nighttime kinds of insights. So one of them for me, for instance, is the difference between imagination and fantasy. So fantasy is the ability to make up stuff that's not real. Imagination is the ability to volitionally alter my state of consciousness, enter into different realms, encounter entities and energies who reside there, learn from them, and then bring it back, into this side of the veil. So for me, I differentiate then between those two. I differentiate also between truth and fact. Something can be truthful, but not factual, and something can be factual, but not truthful. So my definition of truth is something is truthful if it transforms me and aligns me with God. That's the only kind of something can be factual, like it's 86 degrees outside right now. That's not an earth-shattering realization. It's factual, but I'm not transformed by it. But when I encounter something that transforms me radically, so for me, absolute truth is when I'm transformed radically, forever. That's radical truth. So that'd be another piece for me. I look at the difference between, let's say, between wisdom and information. So for me, between wisdom and knowledge. Knowledge is data which are generated by the sensorium and processed by the brain, whereas wisdom is data that are generated by the heart and processed by the soul. So for me, these kinds of one-liners become really important. Or like a few days ago, I was talking to a client of mine, and he says, I'm kind of depressed, but I'm hopeful about the future. And I said, there's a huge difference between hope and gratitude. Hope is the fear-tinged kind of expectation for a better future, whereas gratitude is the present celebration of the mystery of life. So I love just coming up with these kind of one-liners to kind of jumpstart the engine.
It did have an effect on me. I try to do some meditation or communication with the source every day and often at night. And instead of praying, I simply, for me, this is me speaking, express gratitude. I express gratitude that I can still see with macular degeneration. I express gratitude that I have a wife whom I love despite our differences, as everybody has differences. That we have been given a real gift of being able to see outside the box to help people heal, even at our own risk. She and I are both in alignment on this. And for me, it's just a matter of expressing gratitude now. And if I ask for anything in prayer, it's that all of us can see each other as children of God, as children of the source, and as related to each other spiritually rather than killing each other. You want to comment on
Yeah, you've nailed it, Robert. Absolutely nailed it. That is the essence of true spirituality. Because true spirituality is predicated on the realization that there is only God. That's the last thing I say at night before I go to sleep. There is only God, there is only love. Literally, that's the ultimate truth. Everything else is a holographic fractal, and it's important to be participant observers, to participate in incarnation, but not identify with incarnation. So sometimes I just do a little 3-tier model. I talk about my role self, which is to be an Irish, an Irish man, in this lifetime. Then my soul self, which is the eternal part of me that was never born and will never die. And then the source part of me, the realization that, ultimately there is only God. I sometimes say to my community, life is a dream that the ego is having. And the ego is a dream that the soul is having. And the soul is a dream that spirit is having. And spirit is a dream that source is having. So we're God's dream. We're simply God in drag. Everything that exists is God in drag. Whether it's a bunny rabbit or an oak tree or a rock or a human being or an ascended master. We're simply, aspects of the divine. And that realization, how could I possibly be prejudiced against anybody if I have that realization? And particularly if I subscribe to reincarnation. And at this stage, I've recovered maybe about 11 different lifetimes that snippets of which I can recover. And I think to myself, those who I'm currently prejudiced against, because I was born white and male and Irish and Catholic, those whom I might be tempted to be prejudiced against, I was in all those positions in the past. Or if not, I'll be there in the future. Because unless I've savored, every particular flavor of incarnation, I don't really know what life is about, and I don't know what love is about, and I don't know what unity consciousness is about. And so you nailed it right there. The realization that there was only God, and we are the way in which God, experiences.
Well, again, on a spiritual level, most religions believe that, quote, there was a beginning, and at the beginning, there was God. Well, if God was at the beginning, what could only exist now?
Right. So this is
I'm thinking this is logic to me.
Absolutely.
This came to me decades ago.
Right.
If there is, and we in the West tend to think linear.
Yes.
And those in the East think circular.
Yeah.
But most religions of the world do have a faith in the divine, in the source, or in nirvana.
Right.
And if there's God at the beginning, all that could exist right now is God.
Yes. And then we're stuck with the kind of the science of it, because science is predicated on 4 things, all sciences: space, time, energy, and matter. They're the 4 components of the scientific system. But the truth is, you can dispense with these in the course of a day. When you're dreaming at night, there's neither space nor time. A few months ago, I had a dream of being with my grandfather, who died in 1956, and I'm in our bedroom, our shared bedroom back in Ireland, which is 6,000 miles to the east, and 70 years in the past. So he's there with me. So there's neither space nor time. So, and it does not matter because you're creating literally from your mind, you're creating the dream you're having. So we have to re-examine the whole notion of space and time. There are particular ways of trying to wrestle with incarnation. But if the Big Bang was a singularity, I do not believe in a linear progression from past to present to future. I believe what I call rather an asymptotic spiral, that we're not going round and round in circles and just chasing our tail and getting nowhere. We're spiraling. Every time we meet the same kind of situation, we're dealing with it more and more adroitly. But the gradient is getting steeper and steeper and steeper. So an asymptote is where a graph climbs more and more steeply until finally there's an infinite amount of change in zero amount of time. And then you have kind of a singularity, or it's called asymptotic. So I think we're living in what I would call a spiral asymptote, and that where we're going to transcend both time and space and energy and matter and have an experience of source, because time is an artifact of the Big Bang. So to even ask myself the question, what existed before the bang, and where did the bang occur? According to scientists, the Big Bang created time and created space. So I can't even ask the question, where did it bang and when? What was there before it banged? So we're stuck in the kind of this mathematical kind of and we're not going to get anywhere. We have to step outside.
And it's I read a book written by Gerber once. I forget the name of it, but it boiled down to solving the riddle of the universe amounted to solving the square root of -1.
Right. Yeah.
Because that then pushes you onto the spiritual side of things.
Absolutely. And what's fascinating to me is that I majored in maths in college, and the square root of -1 is called iota. It's quite an imaginary number. It was invented by an Italian mathematician. Somebody told him, if you square any number, it has to be positive. If you take any number and multiply it by itself, it's always going to be positive. You multiply 3 by 3, it's going to be +9. But you multiply -6 by -6, you're going to get +36. And so how could it be, that you could multiply two negative numbers by each other and get a positive number? So he said, I'm going to create a number such that if you multiply it by itself, it's still negative. And he created the square root of -1. Because if you multiply the square root of -1 by the square root of -1, you get -1. So it's a total anomaly. So they said, this is ridiculous, this is stupid kind of stuff. The funny thing is, all of our space travel came out of that insight. Something which is totally fictitious creates these extraordinary practical outcomes. The same thing is true. I lived on the equator, literally on the equator, for 14 years. I guarantee you there's no bump on the ground when you go over the equator. I went over many times. But we take this imaginary fiction of an equator, and it allows us to be able to map every point on the Earth's surface by creating lines of longitude and latitude. So a fiction creates these extraordinary practical things. So again, time and space have a practical outcome when we're incarnated, but they're not going to give us the ultimate, answers to kind of the metaphysical questions. Only metaphysics and deep mystical spirituality can do that. So I invented a term many, many years ago. I call it a mysticist. And a mysticist is a cross between a mystic and a physicist, or a mystic and a scientist. Mm-hmm. There are people who are really well versed in both and can cross-fertilize them to their mutual benefit. So people like, I would say, for instance, like Tyler de Chardin, who was, for me, a mysticist. This brilliant paleoanthropologist who was also a deeply mystical Catholic priest. And so there are lots of examples of them. So I think that actually, that's where we're headed. That is the future. That's what I call homo spiritualis. People who are au fait with real science, not scientism. And people who are steeped not in dogmatic religion, but in mystical spirituality.
Do you think that humanity will survive and not destroy itself to reach that point? Because we have wars breaking out all over the place. And I also wanted to pick your brain as a spiritual pastor, what you think about this woke stuff.
Oh, God. How many hours do you have, Robert?
Well, I want you to know I want you back. Okay. I'm looking at Lucas, and he's loving this. I can tell. I know that Lucas is a religious man, and he comes from the spiritual side of religion. So, tell me briefly what you think about wokeism, and then let's go on to see if you think we're going to survive what's coming down.
I think wokeism is the latest weapon in the arsenal of the off-planetary, shadow people. That it's kind of it's the most current and most divisive form of fracturing society. And when you think about it, if there's anything which is so stupidly irrational as the woke positions, like on transgenderism, like a pregnant man, or like Timmy, what's his name, putting what does it put into boys' bathrooms? Putting the what did he put in the boys' bathrooms? And
sanitary napkins,
sanitary napkins, yeah,
or urinals in the girls' bathroom.
Exactly, or kitty litter boxes inside in toilets, for people to pee in who claim that they're cats. I mean, if you were to tell me that 20 years ago, I would say there is no way even the dumbest of people or the most kind of, owned of people could subscribe to any of these precepts. And now they're swallowing it hook, line, and sinker. The crazier it is, the more they love it. Because it's like the world is divided then into the victims and the perpetrators. And everybody who's not me is a perpetrator. But I have to differentiate my sense of victimhood from your sense of victimhood, because I have to be special. Even if you're in a category of victims, I have to be an extra special victim than you, because, I need to put myself at the center of this equation. It's unbelievable to me that even intelligent people could buy, if you pardon my French, this shit, and swallow it.
You can say that on this, and I'm really grateful to you, because you are using succinct English words to describe what you can't describe. I mean, this woke stuff is the indescribable.
Oh, good.
Thank you. Lucas, do you want to chime in on this?
Before we jump back into our discussion, I want to remind you about the amazing health benefits of ozone therapy with Simply O3's home systems. Imagine feeling increased well-being, sharper mental clarity, and less inflammation after just one treatment. The Simply O3 3.0 Complete Kit lets you experience these benefits in the comfort of your own home. It's equipped with laboratory-grade materials to ensure safety and efficacy. This kit offers thousands of treatments and is far more cost-effective than clinic visits. Don't forget to use the code in the description at simplyo3.com for 10% off. I'd also like to give a quick shout out to PROMOLIFE. If you haven't heard of them, they're leading the game in ozone therapy. Crafted with care right here in the USA, their ozone generators are top notch. Beyond that, they've got a full lineup of accessories that truly opens up the world of ozone in innovative ways. To support this podcast and check out what they have to offer, you can visit them at www.promolife.com/ozone. And as a little perk for you, our listeners, there's an exclusive discount code waiting for you in the podcast description below. I mean, I just want to say, holy crap, and you are a great orator, Pastor Sean. You put things into words that I think about it all the time, and I just have no way to articulate it. And I appreciate you coming on and really helping to put words to the thoughts we all have here.
So I need to say to you,
Sean, I was born a racist.
Yeah. Yes.
Simply because I am not, say, this color.
Yes.
Okay. And that was told to me by a member of my family. A brilliant, genius member of my family told me that.
Right. This extraordinary posture we have for seeing the differences between us, instead of there's like 99.9999% of commonality between all the humans on the planet, and there's 0.0001% of the differences, and that's what we focus on, and that's what the victim mentality is about. But as a personal response to you, Lucas, you are generating an extraordinary loving energy. Before you said a word today, the energy that radiates from your face is the light of an old soul shining through a particular spacesuit. So I honor the God in you, Lucas.
Namaste.
Namaste, my brother.
I actually, I'm glad that you mentioned what Namaste means. You hear it all the time, but the divinity in me recognizes divinity in you. It's nice to put a meaning to that word.
Brilliant. Yeah. So
Lucas, I don't mean to interrupt anybody. I'm thoroughly enjoying this. Do you have any other thoughts, questions for this incredible guy?
Well, I do, because you're were ordained a Catholic priest, and I was curious to know when were you excommunicated?
On the 4th of October 2010, the Feast of St. Francis.
Nice.
After 38 years, it's interesting. I got a 2-page letter in Latin from the Vatican saying I'm dismissed. I may not represent myself as a Catholic priest. I can't teach in a Catholic school, university. I can't say Mass in a Catholic church. The only thing that's left is if I come across somebody who is dying at the side of the road and there's no other priest there to hear his confession and offer him absolution, I can then, only in that circumstance, can I exercise my priesthood.
Oh my God! So the only thing left is you can administer last rites.
Last rites, yeah, right. So I'm scouring the freeways looking for an accident.
So my question to you is, how has that shaped your beliefs? Has it reaffirmed your beliefs? Has it changed them? Have you thought differently about the beliefs you held before that? How did that impact you?
It was the final straw in some sense, Lucas, in the sense that all of the great, I'm sure this is true for everybody, but when you retroactively harvest all the crises of your life, you realize that the crises were the greatest opportunities. So every time I got thrown out of something, I got thrown out of Africa by the government, I got thrown out of the Diocese of San Jose, I got thrown out by the Vatican, and so every time I'm more and more free. I can think what I want to think, I can say what I believe to be my truth. But even when I was in Africa, I spent 14 years, living on the equator. I didn't have electric light at night, so using candles, I went through my entire cosmology, my personal cosmology, my belief systems. And I had 2 buckets. And I would go through my beliefs and say, take a particular belief. If I hadn't been born Irish Catholic and I heard this, would I believe it to be true? If yes, I'd put it in the yes bucket. If no, I'd throw it into the other bucket. So could I really believe, if I were born Hindu or Jewish, that there's a man in Rome who's infallible, that when he speaks ex cathedra on matters of faith and morals to be held by all the faithful, he's inerrant? Would I believe that if I were born Jewish or Hindu? No bloody way. So that goes into the false bucket. So if I came across the phrase, as you would that men should do to you, do you also to them in like manner. If I had been born a Hindu or Buddhist and I heard that, would I believe it? Absolutely. So I created these 2 buckets. And then I created a personal cosmology over the stuff I really believed in. So for years and years and years before I got excommunicated, I was preaching a very different cosmology, one that made sense to me, one that could make my heart sing, one that stretched me out of my comfort zone, one that I kept updating, and one that could explain to me, at least, give me a model to accommodate all my own personal experiences. And then I came across there's a great a Gnostic gospel, the Gnostic Gospel of Thomas, where he says, there are 6 stages to the process. He says, those who seek should not stop searching until they find stage 2. And when they find, they will be disturbed, stage 3. And when they're disturbed, they will marvel. And when they marvel, they will rule. And when they rule, they will rest. So I'm thinking, what does that mean? So there's a lot of spiritual seekers out there, but they're brought up in a particular kind of a religious system, sometimes very dogmatic or fundamentalist. And now they're seeing new ideas. They're searching for truth, and they find a different model, and they're scared because this new model, if they accept it, is going to pull the rug out from underneath them. They're going to lose their friends, their family, their church, and everything else. So most of them run back very, very quickly to Mother Church. If you continue going, the next stage is you marvel. You realize for the first time, holy God, I was living an illusion. I was buying all this stuff that I was being told without any proof whatsoever. So I'm marveling, firstly, at the fact that I was kind of living in an illusion. And then I can rule because now I have total control over my own life. There is nobody telling me what to believe or what to say. And then finally I can rest. I realize I've understood what my mission is. I'm in alignment with my mission. And now in some senses, I'm free really.
Awesome. Thank you. That gives me a lot to think about my own perspective on life and religion. I grew up Catholic, baptized Catholic. I went to school, liberal school, and kind of stepped away from the church, just to kind of think of things different perspective, give myself a chance to think the way that other people might think about a particular situation. I consider myself pretty lost right now. I don't really know where I'm at, but this has definitely given me a lot to help remap the path.
That's beautiful, Lucas. And, be your own cartographer. because you're meant to go where nobody else has gone before. You're a unique personality with a unique mission and unique experiences. And therefore, the model that you craft it must fit you perfectly. Now, you'll keep updating it, obviously, but you have to believe in the journey, that it's no accident that you are who you are and when you are.
Sean, what did the government COVID mishigash, for lack of a better term, do to your flock? I mean, you had a fairly large following, did you not?
Yes, I did.
What happened?
Two things happened in a sense. I lost a whole bunch of them, all the kind of the woke people. I lost a bunch of those. But I've been doing a lot of interviews over the last 3 or 4 years, with some fairly big names. I had interviews that drew 155,000 views. And so I'm getting a whole other demographic that are contacting me. They're not necessarily part of the community, but we're in dialogue with each other, And so in that way, I think, I have a much bigger reach than I did with just having a community of like 150, 200 people, and in some senses, I'm finding my tribe. And one of the things I say is, at this stage, I'm more interested in waking up the other lions rather than trying to wake up the sheep. There's a lot of sheep out there who are going to kind of be dedicated wokesters, until some really dramatic event occurs. In the meantime, we want to create, lions who are awake, and who are able to defend, and not be a pushover for the kind of the bait that's been dangled in front of the rest of us.
Now, I asked you a question before that we didn't elaborate on, and I'm going to ask you to expand upon it, but I'm going to start with my perspective. Sure. I'm a physician, and I see what the evil side is trying to do. The evil side is trying to literally turn us into laboratory rats, which it did with COVID. We were all lab rats on an untested genetic modification of our body. And I see what they want to do. If we ever get AI is going to be diagnosing you and treating you. Yep. And you probably didn't see my last YouTube post where a guy came in with chronic pain for years and years and years. And Terry and I evaluated him by his medical history and with energy kinesiology testing. And he was scheduled to have surgery to fuse his back. And in an hour and a half in our office, 100% of his pain went away, despite horrible complicating factors. Right. Now, this is not the type of thing that's going to happen if the force, not the good force, if the dark side gets its way. Yeah. So what do you see happening that might enable humanity to escape the throes of this, which seems to be escalating by the hour?
Yeah, that is it. A few things come up for me, Robert. The first one is that obviously the darkest period is before the dawn begins to break. And I really, really believe, that we signed up to be on planet Earth at a time of crisis. And so there's nobody here. We didn't take a wrong turn at the Andromeda galaxy and wind up, in the Milky Way by mistake. That we volunteered to be here. But when we come down, we're subject to 4 kind of diminutions. The first one is we have to trade in cosmic identity for this little 150-pound spacesuit. The second thing is I have to trade cosmic consciousness for a tiny little laptop that I'm carrying between my ears. The third one is that I have to invent the notion of time because the laptop is radically unable to grok the entire gestalt, so as to break up the experiences into bite-sized pieces and process them sequentially, thus giving rise to the illusion of time. And then fourthly, there's amnesia. We agree to be amnesiac for who we really are and what our mission is, because the treasure hunt is about discovering why we came and who we are. Now, I think that nobody volunteers to kind of parachute into a planet or into a dimension in which there's the outcome is predetermined as being total destruction and chaos. I don't think any one of us would have volunteered for that. So at some deep, deep, deep soul level, we realize that light is going to win out over dark. But there are 2 caveats for me. We have to make sure that it's in God's time and it's in God's method. I can't force my egoic agenda on this situation. I can't say, I want it to get better and I want it to happen in this fashion, in this timeline. If it takes 2 or 3 more incarnations, I'm happy to come back and put my shoulder to the wheel again. And so I know it's going to succeed, because it would be senseless to volunteer for a predetermined disaster. The question is, have I the patience, and have I the connection to my own soul self that tells me, do what you came to do this time. You may see significant improvement in your lifetime, or you may not, but you'll be back, because you've taken a bodhisattva vow, and you won't give up until every created being is awake and alive. And so I know that at some stage, in God's timing and in God's fashion, light will be our experience.
And comment on this both spiritually and from your experience as a Catholic priest. Let's say there's Satan.
Yes.
Satan is also a creation of God.
Yes.
One of my friends, a very spiritual man, believes that to have the world of duality, we have to have these opposing forces, and that also is part of God's plan.
Right.
Because without that, there would not be a world of duality. You want to comment on that?
Yes, I do. It's a fascinating question. So I remember as a small child growing up in Ireland, I was raised in Gaelic, and my great-grandmother was alive until I was 10 years of age. She was a deeply mystical woman. For her, Mother Mary, the mother of Jesus, was more real than you guys are to me right now. And she would speak aloud to Mary throughout the day. And I was privy to these conversations. I could hear only one side of it, but I presumed that this was the norm, that you could communicate across the veil, So she would gather all of us around the fire every night, and there was a Catholic prayer called the Rosary. I'm sure you know what it is, Lucas. And we would pray 5 decades of the Rosary. And then in Ireland, there was an add-on called the Trimmings, where everybody got to pray for a particular kind of issue or objective. Like, so somebody would say, I want to pray for Pat Murphy's cow, who's going to calve tonight. That'll be a good delivery. Or I want to pray for Johnny Dillon, who went to England. Please, God, make sure he doesn't marry a Protestant. These kinds of prayers. And it came to me one night, and I don't know where I came out of. I'm 5 years old, and I say, please, God, let the devil back into heaven. And my grandmother goes, what in the name of God are you saying, child? And my great-grandmother, who was her mother, said, Francis, leave the child alone. God knows exactly what he's saying. So I don't know whether I was thinking, if we got Satan back into heaven, we'd all be safer here, or I was being compassionate, wanting to forgive even Satan. So that was my first encounter with the notion of Satan. So my belief is that when this co-creation of the cosmos occurred, through with the net, so it seemed, these sparks of the divine, and free will was accorded, people were totally free to make any kinds of choices. So it wasn't initially a choice between good and evil. The example I use sometimes is, if I have a jigsaw puzzle and I tumble it onto the table and there's 5,000 pieces, and what I do is I put it right side up so I can see the colors, and then I find the 4 corner pieces, and then I put in the perimeter, and now I've got 3 clues to finish it. I've got the contours of the pieces. Do they fit together or they don't? The colors, are they matching the picture on the box? And so I'm trying to create this jigsaw puzzle. Now, at some stage, I get to a place where there's 5 or 6 holes left in the jigsaw puzzle, and there's 40 pieces left in the side, and no matter where I put them, they won't fit. And then I come to the awful realization, oh my God, there's part of the puzzle I've assembled, and the pieces didn't actually go together. I forced them together, all that they didn't belong. And I now have to have the courage to disassemble portions of it, and reassign them. And then finally, all the pieces fit and there are no gaps in it. Now, whoever designed the jigsaw puzzle didn't design it to have holes in it and lumps in it. It was designed to make a perfect image. So creation was not designed for holes or for darkness to be in it. But it's up to the players, to put the pieces together in whatever fashion they choose. And if you put pieces together, in a way which is narcissistic, where I'm totally devoted to myself, eventually that leads to greed, that leads to avarice, that leads to anger, that leads to warfare, and that leads to violence of various kinds. So slowly, we create a jigsaw puzzle with lots of holes and lots of lumps in it that won't work. And we have to have the courage to disassemble them. Now, beings who are much more advanced than we like the Satan character, being more technologically advanced and being more intellectually advanced means that you also have greater temptations. The temptations to power are much greater.
Mhm.
At no stage of the journey are we free from the allure of power grabbing. And so in some senses then Satan represents a group, or a mindset which is more interested in personal power than acknowledging the divinity within everything else around it. And over time, that kind of accrues more and more power, and at that stage, then it can intervene, in lower stages of the incarnational process. So I don't think that God created light and dark in order to create duality. God created a system in which people would not just witness the creation, but participate in it, and then use free will to make choices for self or for other. And then it emerges from that, because life, there is no plot to life and there's no script for life. Life is improv theater, absolutely improv theater. We come down here, there's no plot to it, there's no life to it, there's simply an existing scenario into which we parachute, and now we're going to have to make responses to that. I had a client one time who was a professional actor, and he especially was improv theater. And he told me there are 2 rules to improv theater. If you're on stage with another player, there's 2 rules. The first one is you can't reject any line your partner offers you. I can't say to you, Robert, that's a dumb thing to say. I can't give you an answer to that. Because then the whole thing just falls in his face.
Yeah, but that's what the woke side does.
That's exactly what they do.
I think. I don't mean to judge, but that's how I see it.
That's exactly what they're doing. So, that's the first rule he said. You have to work with every line you're given. And the second one is you got to feed your partner lines that play to his strengths. You know what he's good at. Feed him lines that can make him look good. And then the play is going to really, really take off.
Yeah.
Really, really great.
Yeah.
So that's what I find in life. We have to play, we have to harvest everything that happens to us. Play with the lines we're given, the situations we inherit, and feed lines that make people look good. Feed them in the sense that puts them in contact with their own inner divinity so that they can recognize the inner divinity of everything else as well.
Really, really good. Sean, we've been at this over an hour. I want to get Lucas back on before we wrap up to see what comments he has.
Great.
I mean, this is, first of all, I want to ask you, Sean. So I know you have some books. After listening to you speak for an hour and 18 minutes, first thing I want to do is go buy one of your books and read it. Is there somewhere where we can send our audience members to find your books and find out more about you?
If we put my name and go to Amazon.com, I have 6 books. Well, the first one is not available because I wrote it in Swahili, so that's not available on Amazon. I have 5 other books, but the last 2 particularly, one is called Why, What Your Life is Telling You About Who You Are and Why You're Here. And the last one I wrote was Setting God Free, Moving Beyond the Caricature We've Created in Our Own Image. So you get both of those are currently available. And one of them, I think they're both available actually in Audible as well.
Okay. Is Amazon the preferred route for everyone? Is there a website where you get more of the profits or anything like that?
If you can get a bookstore that's prepared to order for you, yeah, sure.
Okay.
So my own personal kind of website then is called spiritsinSpacesuits.com. So if they go there, they'll get all of the lectures and homilies I've given and where to access the books and stuff. Got it.
And do you post like weekly lectures and homilies on that?
I do. Every Sunday I give a drosh, I mean a 35, 40-minute homily. They're all up there. And any kind of any interviews I've given over the last 3 years, particularly, about probably maybe 40 interviews over the last 3 years, they're all up there as well for people. It's totally free to anybody to use it in any way they want.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. So I just have one question. I would love to get you back. I know Dr. Rowen would as well. I think there's a lot of cans of worms that we haven't even begun to open yet. But I just want to ask just open question for people my age. I'm in my mid-20s. What advice could you offer for people trying to just be better for themselves, be better for the people around them, be better for a better world?
I would say, for me, there's 3 components to it. The first one is developing a personal cosmology. You have to work out your own model of what the universe is about. And that takes a lot of work, So that's the first piece. The second piece I advocate is becoming part of what I call an intentional community. Find a group of like-minded individuals in their 20s who are interested in mystical spirituality and create some kind of a forum to get together, either virtually or kind of physically. And the third one is some kind of regular disciplined spiritual practice, meditation, reading, spending time in nature. If you've brothers or sisters who have little kids until they're about 4 or 5, join in their games, not patronizingly, but listen to what they're doing. They're in contact with beings at the other side of the veil. So join in their games. Don't pat them on the head and say, "Oh, cute." Listen and go where they're going, and they'll take you, where you're going. And the last piece would be spend time in nature on your own. Don't go with anybody, because conversation, you're not going to hear the wild animals if you go, in a conversation. So there'd be a few kind of ideas off the top of my head.
So self-discipline, community, good habits, and meditation.
Exactly. Brilliant.
Awesome.
And you are the future, Lucas. I may not see the shift, and that's fine. I'll be back. You may see the shift, and the question is now, can you kind of bring in a posse to ride with you?
Certainly hope so.
Yeah, great.
Wow. What? I bet you didn't expect this, Lucas.
I did. Sorry, I didn't expect it.
No, I didn't expect it. Sounds like Pastor Sean didn't expect it either.
No.
This was good. This was good, Sean. I really want to have you back, and not in the distant future either.
Sure. Have mouth will travel, Robert.
I love it.
Yeah.
Good.
And I want to thank you for your patience of hanging in there during the technical difficulties at the beginning. That you were both so patient.
Good.
Absolutely worth it.
Yeah.
It was, and I'm really glad you got to work it out.
Yeah.
So the next time we won't have to wait an hour to begin.
Amen to that. Yeah.
Okay. Any final comments, Pastor Sean?
I think the most important thing, I believe there are 4 levels to compassion. I call them the 4 C's. The first level is confirmation. Attaboy, you're doing a great job, to make sure that we encourage each other. The second one is cooperation. We're part of a team. Every one of us is playing a different role. Not everybody is going to be the quarterback. So whatever role you've been assigned in this incarnation, that's a form of compassion. The third one is compensation. Somebody drops the ball and you pick it up to make sure there's not an interception. So make up for other people's mistakes, where they unwittingly create mistakes. And the fourth one is confrontation. Don't be afraid to call people out on their shit when it's appropriate to do that. Yeah.
And sadly, I hate to close on this, but sadly, that's where society is headed, on confrontation. And instead of working things out like this, people are going like this and then going away from each other.
People forgot how to take constructive criticism.
Yeah, exactly.
And not just constructive criticism. People forgot how to have a dialogue to find out that they may agree on more than they disagree.
Exactly.
And I see that in my own case. In one of my posts, I did not approve of Trump. I did not endorse him or anything. I just pointed out what the system was doing to him.
Yes.
And the double standard, having been there myself, and people walked away from my medical message for just putting that out there.
Yes. Yep. Totally. So one final thing then, Robert and Lucas. There's a beautiful Buddhist practice called Tonglen. And Tonglen is the practice where you kind of, at the in-breath, you breathe in the pain of the world and you transmute it in your heart. And with the out-breath, you breathe out compassion and love. And so I think that's a really powerful exercise, not just in interpersonal dynamics, but actually at a global level, to have the courage to breathe in the pain, transmute it, and breathe out love anyway.
Very good. Thank you for that.
Awesome. I think we can end on that here.
And many thanks to you guys.
Namaste.
Namaste to the two of you.
Namaste.
Until the next time.
Very soon.
God bless. Goodbye.
As we conclude today's episode, consider the long-term health investment with Simplio3's ozone therapy systems. Designed for easy and safe home use, the Simplio 3 3.0 complete kit comes with a lifetime warranty and a 6-month money-back guarantee. That's right, try it risk-free for 6 months and experience firsthand the reduction in brain fog, inflammation, and more. If you're not satisfied, receive a full refund. Ready to take control of your health? Visit simply03.com. I'd also like to give another shout out to our sponsors over at shopc60.com. If you haven't heard of C60, it's that antioxidant known to enhance mitochondrial function and combat inflammation. Many sync C60 with their keto and intermittent fasting regimens, seeing a boost in energy and clarity. If you're past 40 and looking to refresh your vitality, explore shopc60.com and don't forget the 15% off code in the description for your initial purchase. Thank you for listening to this conversation with Dr. Todd of Wokeism. If you found this conversation inspiring, please share it with your friends, family, and colleagues. Until next time, stay safe and be well.